Hello everyone.
It's Saunab from Nepal. I know it's been a long time without any videos because I've been busy and I'm still busy, but I will try my best to handle everything along with this video. But in this video, I'm gonna talk about something very important for a language learner. A lot of people consider that grammar is the difficult part of learning language, but I'm here to tell you that it's not. I mean, that all the teachers, all the schools, they make grammar complicated, and it's not their fault, is they have to go according to the syllabus. But in this video, if you are self-studying the language, or if you don't want to focus that much on grammar, just focus on speaking or overall the complete language, I'm gonna tell you like the 50% of grammatical thing or even more that you don't need if you are learning to speak the language. But before, I am an ultra level polyglot from Nepal who speaks 6-7 languages. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Things you don't need.
Well, the first grammatical thing that you don't need to learn is noun. Yep, you heard it right. What I mean by this is like nouns are just a name of anything, like this copy or your name or my name, the country name, name of these things or anything is a noun. But the thing is, I'm not saying that you don't need to know the names of all those things, all those like places in the particular language. What I'm saying is like you don't need to know the classifications of those nouns. For example, if you have ever seen textbook of English language, you might have seen something like abstract noun, common noun, proper noun, blah blah blah. I cannot name them, and you don't need to learn them. And also there is second classification of noun, which is like singular and plural, and third, which is countable and uncountable. But if you just know how to identify if whether a noun is countable, for example, this pen is countable because I can count it, but that water is not countable because I can't count it. So in that way you have to learn, but you don't need to memorize all those tables, all those rules. And speaking of singular and plural, singular means one, plural means more than two or two. And if you just know how to make a noun plural, for example, in English, 90% of the case or 95% of the case you add an s or an es to the noun to make it plural. For example, pen, pens, copy, copies. So yeah, you don't need to remember all those syntax, all those grammars of nouns if you don't want to pass an exam. I'm saying that in that case, don't get me wrong. And the second thing that you don't need to learn is pronouns. Yep. What are pronouns? Pronouns are just the words that replace the noun. For example, I can say the pen is mine, but I can also say it is mine, right? It replaces the pen. So in that case, I'm not teaching you grammar, but in that case, for example, I can say Jack is a doctor, but I can replace Jack with the pronoun he. He is a doctor. So these words are called pronoun in the English language. But the thing is, you don't need to learn the pronouns classification. What I mean by this is you have demonstrative pronouns, which are this, that, blah blah blah, and you got personal pronouns, reflexive pronoun, blah blah blah. Uh, you don't need to learn all those classification, all those rules of using and different sort of pronouns. All you need is just remember like there are seven pronouns which are, or seven or eight maybe, which are I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. It were done. For other types of pronoun like reflexive, myself, yourself, blah blah blah. And for object pronoun, which I don't know how they call in grammatical thing, like me, you, us, them, blah blah blah. You don't need to know all those classification, all those syntax. What I mean by syntax is just a grammar rule of those words. And the third thing that you don't need to learn is adjective. I mean the classification of adjective. What's that? Like you got like different kind of forms to modify our adjective, right? Modify an adjective. For example, I can say small, smaller, smallest. But if you know all these general rules and some exceptions, you don't need to remember what are called comparative, what are called superlative, and what are called blah blah blah, what are called possessive adjective, what are called pronoun adjective, blah blah blah, which I can't even recognize to save my life. And the fourth thing that you don't need to learn is an article. What are articles? Articles are just the words that define the noun they precede. For example, I can say a pen, an apple, the sun. These a and the are called article. and all you need to know is like you can just I'm talking the syntax of English language. If you have a noun starting with a vowel sound, then put an n. If you have a noun starting with a consonant sound, then put an a. And if you have a like unique object or some rules to use the, or some rules to use no articles, just use respectively. But the thing is, you don't need to memorize all these tables and what are called definite articles, what are called indefinite articles. No. After like if you have enough exposure to the language, if you have read the language well, and if you listen to the language well, you will get the context of when to use which one. That's what I did to learn all this grammar rule in English. And the fifth thing that you don't need to learn is types of verbs. What are they? They are like the modal verbs, auxiliary verbs, helping verbs, main verbs, uh, blah blah blah. How I don't know everything of them. All you need to know in the context of English language is just five tenses. Five forms of verb: verb one, verb two, verb three, verb four, verb five. But if you are learning other languages like Spanish or like other languages, all you don't need to know all those five forms of verb. All you need to know is conjugation, what I will explain later in this video. And the seventh thing you don't need to learn is seventh or sixth. I'm losing my mind. Conjunction. What are conjunction? They are the words used to connect other phrases or sentences. For example, I can say, I have a pen. I can also say, I have a pen and a copy. So this end is conjunction. And speaking of that, there is also a classification of conjunction like purpose conjunction, connective conjunction, blah blah blah. I don't know if I'm correct or not, but somebody correct me in the comment. You don't need to know all those tables. All you need is just memorization of some common conjunction like and, because, but, for, from, and blah blah blah. And then you are done. The last thing that you don't need to learn is irregular verbs. What I mean by this, like if you have seen any language, there are 90% of the verbs which are regular. I mean they follow the rules of using them in a sentence, but 10% of them are irregular, which you don't need to know. I mean, some common of them you can you can learn some common of them, but you don't need to learn all those words that you barely use even in your native language. So now let me talk about the things that you need to learn when you learn grammar in the beginning stage.
Things you need to learn.
First thing that you need is obviously conjugation. What is conjugation? Conjugation is just the way of modification of verb with the correct pronouns it is uses. For example, I can say I go, you go, but I cannot say he go. I would have to say he goes. So that's called conjugation. And in Spanish language, I can explain it more in a brief in a more concise way. Like if you have ever tried learning Spanish language, you might have encountered conjugation, which are just the modification of verb. I mean, you can say yo, which is I, yo como, or tú, which is you, comes, meaning you eat. This rule of modification of verb is called conjugation. And if you learn the personal pronoun and if you learn just the conjugation, you can form sentences, boom, no time, right? For example, if you just learn how to say I, and if you just learn how to conjugate the verb comer, which is to eat, in the right way, you can say I eat. Just a simple. You don't need to remember all these rules that I just explained to you before, uh, like possessive pronoun, blah 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 blah, right? The second thing that you must or that you should learn while you are learning grammar is obviously tenses. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you need to learn all those names of tenses. Nah. Like if you have ever encountered some textbook of English, and if you have ever looked at English grammar, you might have encountered there are dual tenses in English, and you don't need to remember all those tenses in the beginning, but some common like present continuous, present simple, past simple, future simple, and yeah, you are done. You don't need to know all those future perfect continuous, which is the example, like which is the example of saying, uh, by the time you by the time you arrive in the city, I will have been living in that city for 5 years. Like this is the grammar that you barely use even in your native language. So why are you learning if you are learning a foreign language, right? And speaking of tenses, you don't need to remember all those like for all pronouns. I mean, just a basic syntax. And if you get more exposure to the language, you will get familiarity to the language more and more. So you don't have to memorize all those tables, all those conjugation rules that you see at school, that you see at a grammar class. Like why do we have to make things hard, like, right? And the third thing that you don't need to learn, sorry, that you do need to learn is active passive. What is that? What is active? What is passive? Active is just like when you say, I eat an apple. It's active sentence, like you are the one who is eating the apple. And I can also say these sentences without changing the meaning, but the view of saying, I mean the viewpoint of saying is like I would say, the apple the apple is eaten by me, which is the same as saying I eat an apple. This is called active passive. In the second sentence, the main focus is on apple, what is being eaten, not what you eat. I mean, not who eats, like what is being eaten. So that's called passive sentence. You do need to learn them, but when you are at A2 or a B1 level, not in the early beginning where in the stage where you don't even know how to read the language. Nah. First you need conjugation, then tenses, then first you need pronouns, then tenses, then conjugation, then blah blah blah. All I'm gonna say, and then this structure called passive, active passive. And moving on, you need something called reported speech, which is just to say the exact thing that someone has said. For example, I can say, he said that, sorry, he said, I am not coming tomorrow. And I can change that, he said that he is not coming tomorrow, right? The same thing. So you need to learn how this works, but just the basic. You don't need to be able to speak in the beginning. Don't expect yourself to speak in the day 1 or in the day 30, in the day 60. After like 1 year of learning and the language well, having the exposure well, you will be able to speak the language. Trust me, that's what I did with Spanish. Now the next thing that you are gonna learn is direct and indirect object pronouns. What are they? They are just like, first let me explain what direct object pronouns are. They are like when you have one object in the sentence being affected by the sentence directly. For example, I can say I eat apple, but I can replace apple with it. So I can say I eat it. That it is the direct object being directly affected with the action of eating. And what is indirect object? It's like when you have two objects and the second one is being affected indirectly by the object. For example, I can say I buy a car for he. I mean, I buy a car for Jack. I don't know how many times I talked about Jack. Sorry for that guy, but yeah, let me continue. Like I can say I buy a car for Jack, but I can replace with I buy him it. Him is the indirect object because he is not being bought, but instead he, like, I am buying the car for him. I am buying it for him. So he is the direct object. Sorry, indirect object. I don't know. I am fumbling. So if you know this, then you can form sentences like I eat apple, but you cannot always say I eat apple, right? In some situation that you need to say I eat it, so you can say that. And it's so simple, like, yeah, I'm saying it's so simple. You can say, you can form that type of sentences in just no time if you don't get attracted to those grammar zone of adjective, nouns, pronouns, blah 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 blah. And the second thing is modal verbs. What are they? They are just like can, could, and may, might, should, shall. In English, it's so simple. Like they do not change according to the person we are talking about. For example, it's always the same. I can, you can, he can, she can. It's not I can, he can, she can. It's I can, he can, she can. So it's the same. But in other languages, it may different. For example, in Spanish, as far as I know, is yo puedo, puedes, tú puedes, which is you can, and él puede, he can. Like it differs in other languages. But if you are learning, just learn some like some conjugation of these verbs, and you are done. You can say I can eat it. It's so simple. Like in like after learning some grammar rule without being attracted to those how to say adjectives, noun, verbs, blah blah blah, you can form this type of sentences. And the next thing that you need, the last thing, is of course relative colors. For example, like relative colors, what are they? They are just in English context, they are just the question words with but they are not used as the question. For example, I can say what is this, being what used as a question. But I can say I kill you. Sorry, no, that's a violent word. I can say I am gonna use the pen which I bought here, which is not a question but rather a pronoun. Maybe a pronoun, I don't know what they are called, but it describes the pen which I'm gonna talk about. For example, I am gonna use the pen that I bought. So this type of words, for example, you cannot always say I ate an apple, I go there, but you have to say I eat an apple that he gift me or gift to me. So in that way you have to learn grammar. So in this video I explain what you should learn and what you shouldn't. So the thing is, if you are gonna, I'm saying it for the last time in this video, like if you ain't gonna pass any, like take any exam, if you ain't gonna, what is the teach grammar in any school or something, you don't need to learn all those grammar. So you don't need to learn all those grammar, but if you are gonna be a teacher, if you are gonna take an exam, you do need to learn what I didn't tell you to learn. I hope you got what I'm saying. And speaking of irregular verbs, there are tons of them. I mean, 10% of the verbs in any language might be irregular, and you don't need to know all those 10%. You just need to know some commons. For example, in some languages like Russian, the most common verb, I guess, which is to eat, is irregular. You do need to learn them. And in many languages, the verb to go, which is also important, is also an irregular verb. But other apart from that, the verbs like to stop, to cancel, to blah blah blah, the kind of intermediate or advanced word which may be regular, maybe not, you don't need to know all those, like, without any context, but after exposure you will get familiar to all the concept that a particular language has. So that's all I had to talk about in that video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. That's Vidania.